Alina Habba is Donald Trump's lawyer right now, one of Trump's lawyers. She's stunningly incompetent. And one of the fascinating things that we are seeing right now is that she is proactively referring to Donald Trump's adult children as kids and the boys when she refers to Don Jr. and Eric Trump. This is a concerted effort to make it seem as though they are being unfairly targeted in Trump's civil trial. As you know, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, who are defendants in that civil trial, as well as Ivanka Trump, who is not a defendant in that civil trial, they all testified over the last couple of weeks. Here is Alina Habba. She's even younger than they are, and she's referring to them almost like they are little kids. Take a listen to this.
They looked at their titles and they looked at, frankly, PR. And if they patch in the kids, it's more days that Letitia James can go out there and speak. It's more press for her, and it's more of an impact. Radical left liberals don't really care about facts. They don't care about law. They care about making statements. And these kids did nothing wrong. They should not be in this case. Ivanka's already out of the case. The boys should not be in the case.
The boys.
Testimony was direct. And they just want to make it as if there was some sort of corruption and some sort of conspiracy. There was none. There was an accounting firm. There were lawyers. And
all right. So you get the point, right? The kids, the boys, they're so cute and they're being wrapped into this. All the people she's referring to are older than her. Maybe she's the exact same age as Eric, roughly, right? We're talking about a 45-year-old man in Don Jr. who now is on a colonoscopy schedule, right? I mean, he's old enough to be on a colonoscopy schedule, and he's being referred to as one of the boys, the kids that is being unfairly wrapped into this. Yes, it's hilarious, but remember, when you see these Republicans talking about some 16-year-old black kid and saying we shouldn't refer to them as a kid, look at what they did, we need to be... And then on the other hand, they're referring to a 45-year-old as a boy and a kid when it's useful for defending Trump. There's a little bit of motivated reasoning there, I think we have to point out. Here's one other clip. This seems totally staged. Maria Bartiromo asks Alina Habba about the judge's clerk. And Alina Habba says, I'm not even allowed to talk to you about that because of the gag order. Sort of the whole they're silencing my speech thing. Listen to this.
You have been complaining about the judge's clerk, and you say that the judge is compromised and the clerk appears compromised. Tell me why.
Well, I actually can't tell you why because I'm gagged.
Right.
I'm gagged.
I can tell you that, we'll be filing papers to address all of those issues. And the fact that, frankly, Maria, I can't even discuss it with you. Wow. And I'm his spokeswoman, I'm his attorney, says a lot about what the judicial system, the state of our judicial system right now.
I think I did see that there were donations that the clerk had given, very supportive to the Democrats. That was one issue. Are you going to file to get a mistrial?
Yes.
They are demanding a mistrial.
Will you do that today?
Soon.
Yeah.
Very soon. Very, very soon. It is absolutely absurd and laughable that what Alina Habba seems to be arguing here is that their side hasn't gotten to tell their story. Trump's version of events simply hasn't been able to be told. And yet every single one of us has heard that version of events ad nauseum. There was nobody was damaged by this. The loans were paid back. The properties are worth way more than anyone tells you. Mar-a-Lago's worth, I think at one point he said we got up to 1.8 billion. He claimed it was worth 100 times the assessed value. The idea that their side hasn't been able to tell their story is hilarious. But if they really believe that, put Trump back on the stand. Because remember, the prosecution, or I guess we would say the plaintiffs, I actually don't know in a civil trial what the right term is. The state rested last week. Trump now gets to mount a defense. Trump and his lawyers can put him right back on the stand if they believe his story simply hasn't been told and they need to hear it again or they need to hear it the right way. I don't think they're planning to do that. And so on some level, they know that that's not really what this is about. So, the poor little kids, 45-year-old Don Jr. and everybody else, they're just being railroaded and Trump's not being allowed to speak and Alina Habba's not being allowed to speak and she's gagged. They've gagged her. But at the end of the day, they have had more media coverage, and their version of events has been put forward all over the place. The question is it actually a defense to what is being alleged? It seems as though the answer is no. So we'll see what Trump's defense looks like this week. We'll take a break. Maybe tomorrow, maybe Wednesday, we'll follow up. You know, one of the odd things that goes on in bathrooms in the United States, where is this going, is, you know, when I moved to the U.S. from Argentina, there's really no bidets in the United States. The bidet is just a part of life in Argentina. And why would you make a compromise in the bathroom? Why not have the elevated level of comfort and cleanliness, which is now easy and affordable with our sponsor, Hello Tushy? The Hello Tushy bidet cleans everything with a fresh stream of water, 2 times better than alternatives like paper. You just spray and pat. It cuts down toilet paper use by 80%. It saves you money. It reduces paper waste. So a Hello Tushy bidet really pays for itself in under a year. Attaches to your existing toilet. You don't need an electrician. You don't need a plumber. You install it. Takes 8 minutes or less. Super easy. I got one and it is fantastic. And with over 100,000 5-star reviews, every bidet comes with a 30-day risk-free guarantee, 12-month warranty. Stop wiping and start washing. Go to hellotushy.com/Pacman and use the promo code Pacman for 10% off your first order. That's hellotushy.com/Pacman for 10% off. The link is down below.